Her husband tried to humiliate her at his party. With a calm smile, she removed her coat, and everyone froze when they saw what she revealed. Everyone's heart shattered, and what appeared made every guest silent. "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to Mr. Peter's Stories. May the Almighty wrap every woman in a protection so strong that no pain, no worry, and no burden can touch her. May her footsteps be blessed, her heart be guarded, and her soul be lifted with a love that never fades. Women are the light of every home, the calm in every storm, and the heartbeat of every generation. Their patience is a miracle, their kindness is a gift, their strength is divine. I pray that every woman finds peace that stays, joy that grows, and honor that surrounds her everywhere she goes. May blessings flow to her effortlessly, may gentle days follow her, and may every silent prayer from her heart be accepted in the most beautiful way. Truly she deserves the highest respect on earth and the deepest love in heaven. If your heart respects women, like the video. If your soul values them, right, I stand with respect." Dorothy Taylor had learned to smile through humiliation, but tonight would be the last time she ever had to. The Grand Belmore Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the laughter of people who measured their worth in investment portfolios and vacation homes. Dorothy stood near the champagne fountain, watching her husband Dean Brando command the room like he owned it. In a way, he believed he did. He believed he owned everything he touched, including her. "Dean, darling, you must introduce me to your lovely wife," a woman in a silver gown cooed, her eyes scanning Dorothy's simple black coat with barely concealed disdain. Dean turned, his smile faltering for just a moment before he recovered. "My wife. Dorothy's just here for the free champagne." The nearby guests laughed, that polite laughter that cuts deeper than insults. "She doesn't really understand business events. I keep telling her to stay home, but she insists on tagging along." Dorothy's fingers tightened around her glass. She remembered another ballroom years ago when Dean had whispered in her ear during their wedding reception. The memory was so vivid it hurt. His young face full of genuine love, his voice trembling with emotion as he said, "I promise to see you, always. Not your money, not your status, just you. Forever." Forever had lasted exactly 7 years before it started dying. 3 more years had passed since then, and Dorothy had watched the death happen in slow motion, unable to stop it. "Dorothy contributes nothing to my success," Dean continued, his voice carrying across the marble floors. He had positioned himself near a group of investors, men in expensive suits who nodded along with his every word. "Everything you see, gentlemen, I built from nothing. My first startup, my expansion into real estate, my tech investments. All me. Some of us are born to build empires, others are just along for the ride." His mistress Amber laughed at his elbow. She was 26, blonde, and wearing a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She touched Dean's arm with the familiarity of someone who had earned the right, and Dean didn't pull away. He never pulled away from Amber. Not at restaurants, not at business dinners, not even here. At a charity gala where his wife stood 15 feet away, Dorothy's hand moved to the zipper of her coat. Beneath the simple black fabric, she wore a dress of midnight blue silk, and around her neck, resting against her collarbone, was the celestial star. She had worn the coat to hide it, not from shame, but from habit. For 10 years of marriage, she had hidden so much of herself. She had made herself smaller, quieter, less, because Dean had seemed to need that from her. She had watched him transform from the man who loved her in their tiny apartment to the man who needed her to be nothing so he could feel like everything. Tonight, that ended. "Mr. Brando," one of the investors said, raising his glass, "to your continued success. It's rare to see someone build an empire so quickly. 5 years ago, you had one small business. Now you're operating in 6 states. Dean preened under the praise. "Hard work, gentlemen, vision, and knowing when to cut dead weight." His eyes flickered to Dorothy for just a second, making sure everyone understood his meaning. The room had gone quiet around them. People sensed something happening, that electric tension that precedes either disaster or revelation. Dorothy felt 200 pairs of eyes drift toward her as she reached for her coat zipper. "Dean," she said quietly. Her voice shouldn't have carried, but in the sudden silence it did. "Do you remember what you promised me on our wedding day?" Dean turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Dorothy, not now. Go powder your nose or something." "You promised you would always see me," Dorothy continued. Her fingers found the zipper. "You promised that you would love me when we had nothing, and you would love me if we had everything." "We did have nothing," Dean snapped, "and I built everything, while you did what exactly? Sat at home, arranged flowers, went to yoga." Dorothy pulled the zipper down. The coat fell open. The celestial star caught the chandelier light and transformed it into something otherworldly. Diamonds cascaded in a complex web of platinum and starlight, each stone catching and refracting light until Dorothy seemed to be wearing captured galaxies. The centerpiece, a flawless blue diamond the size of a quail's egg, pulsed with inner fire. The room went completely silent. Amber's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud. "That's," one of the society women breathed. "That's the celestial star. It sold at auction last month for $48 million. I watched the bidding online." Dorothy let the coat slide from her shoulders. A server materialized to catch it, bowing slightly as he took it. She stood in her midnight blue silk, the necklace transforming her from invisible wife to something magnificent. "Where did you steal that?" Dean's voice cracked on the last word. His face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. "Where did you get that? Answer me!" Dorothy met his eyes. She had loved those eyes once. She had memorized every fleck of gold in the brown, every smile line at the corners. Now they looked at her like she was a stranger, like she was a problem to solve. "I didn't steal it, Dean," Dorothy said calmly. "I bought it. From my own collection, actually. The auction house handled the sale for me. I'm Dorothy Taylor Ashford, the Taylor Ashford family. Shipping, technology, real estate across 14 states. I believe you've heard of us." The whispers started immediately, a rising wave of shock and speculation. Dean staggered backward, as if she had physically struck him. "No," he said. "No, you're just Dorothy. You're just my wife. You're nobody." "I was never just anything," Dorothy said quietly. "I was everything. You stopped looking." Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, 10 Rolls-Royces pulled up to the hotel entrance in perfect formation. Each one was midnight blue, matching her dress. Chauffeurs in crisp uniforms emerged and lined up at attention. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Phones appeared, camera flashes lit up the room. The society women who had ignored Dorothy all evening surged forward, suddenly desperate to talk to her. The investors who had been praising Dean moments ago were recalculating everything they thought they knew. Dean pushed through the crowd toward her, his face contorted with rage and confusion. "This is impossible. Your family disowned you. You had nothing when we married. Nothing." "I had a trust fund I never touched," Dorothy said. "I had investments you never knew about. I had a father who controlled every aspect of my life until I met you. I thought you were different, Dean. I thought you loved me for me, not for what I could give you, so I hid everything and chose you. I chose love over money. I chose freedom over control." She stepped closer to him, and Dean actually flinched. "I was wrong," Dorothy continued. "You didn't love me for me. You just didn't know there was anything else to love me for. The moment you found success, the moment you felt powerful, you stopped seeing me at all. I became furniture in your life, decoration you were ashamed of because I wasn't shiny enough." "Dorothy, wait. We can talk about this," Dean stammered. "I didn't know. How could I know? You should have told me." "Why?" Dorothy asked. "So you could treat me like a bank account instead of a housewife? Either way, I stopped being a person to you years ago." She turned toward the exit. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. Flashbulbs popped. Someone was crying. Amber stood frozen, her face a mask of calculation, as she realized the man she had hitched herself to was revealed as nothing more than a facade. "Who are you?" Dean shouted after her, his voice breaking. The question echoed through the marble halls. Dorothy paused at the door. She looked back at her husband, at the man she had loved with everything she had, at the stranger wearing his face. "I'm the woman you stopped seeing 3 years ago," she said. "Goodbye, Dean." She walked out into the cool night air. The chauffeurs bowed as she approached. The door of the lead Rolls-Royce opened for her. She slid into the leather interior, and the door closed with a soft, final click. Through the tinted window, she could see Dean stumble out onto the hotel steps. He stood there, surrounded by cameras and whispers and the ruins of his carefully constructed world, looking lost. Dorothy didn't look back as the car pulled away. Behind her, the Grand Belmore Hotel blazed with light and scandal. Ahead of her, the road stretched dark and empty and full of possibility. For the first time in 3 years, Dorothy Taylor Ashford could breathe. Chapter 2. The truth of who she was. The penthouse had never felt like home, but tonight it felt like a museum of lies. Dorothy walked through rooms filled with expensive furniture Dean had chosen, art Dean had purchased, a life Dean had designed without asking her opinion once. She moved through the silence like a ghost, visiting her own haunted past, remembering the woman who had lived here and pretended to be happy. Her phone buzzed continuously. Text messages flooded in from people who hadn't spoken to her in years. Society women who had ignored her at every event suddenly wanted lunch dates. Business contacts she didn't know she had were offering partnerships. The news had spread fast. Dorothy Taylor, the invisible wife, was actually Dorothy Taylor Ashford, the invisible heiress. She turned off her phone and walked to the bedroom. From the back of her closet, behind clothes Dean had criticized for being too simple, she pulled out a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were photographs. Real photographs, not the posed portraits that decorated the penthouse walls. These were printed images from when printing pictures still mattered, from when every photo meant something because film was limited and precious. The top photo showed 2 college students sitting on a brick wall outside the library. Dorothy was 22, wearing jeans and a sweater that had cost $15. Dean was 23, his hair longer than he wore it now, his smile genuine and unguarded. They were eating pizza from a box balanced between them, and they were laughing. She remembered that day with painful clarity. They had just taken their final exams. Dean had been stressed about his business degree, worried he wasn't smart enough, worried he would never amount to anything. Dorothy had dragged him outside, bought him pizza with her tutoring money, and told him he was going to change the world. "You see things differently than everyone else," she had said. "You see solutions where other people see problems. That's worth more than any grade." Dean had kissed her then, tasting like cheap pizza and hope. "Marry me," he had said suddenly. "We're broke," Dorothy had laughed. "So what? We'll be broke together. We'll eat pizza and be happy. I don't need money, Dorothy. I just need you." She had said yes that night. They got married at the courthouse with 2 friends as witnesses. Dorothy wore a white dress from a thrift store. Dean wore his only suit. They were deliriously happy. Dorothy's father found out about the marriage through a society page gossip column. He had shown up at their tiny apartment, fury radiating from every pore. "You married this nobody?" he had shouted, looking at Dean like he was dirt. "You threw away your future for this." "I didn't throw anything away," Dorothy had said quietly. "I chose my own life." "Then you're no daughter of mine," her father had spat. "You want to play poor? Fine. You're cut off. No trust fund, no family money, no help. Let's see how long love lasts when you can't pay rent." He had left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle their cheap dishes. Dean had held Dorothy while she cried, promising her they would be fine, they would make it work. Love was enough. And it had been. For a while, it truly had been. Dorothy looked at the next photo. Their first apartment. 1 bedroom, a kitchen so small they could barely both fit in it, furniture from yard sales and hand-me-downs. They were standing in the doorway, Dean's arm around her waist, both of them grinning like they had won the lottery. She remembered coming home from her 2 tutoring jobs to find Dean asleep at the tiny kitchen table, his head on his laptop, surrounded by business plans and cold coffee. She would wake him gently, and he would smile at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "How was your day?" he would always ask. "Better now," she would always answer. They would make dinner together in their impossibly small kitchen, dancing to music from Dean's phone, eating pasta because it was cheap and filling. Dean would tell her about his business ideas, his voice full of passion and excitement, and Dorothy would believe every word because his belief was infectious. "I'm going to build something amazing," Dean would say. "And when I do, the first thing I'm buying you is that house you drew, remember? The one with the big windows and the garden?" Dorothy had sketched it on a napkin once, her dream home. Dean had kept that napkin in his wallet, carrying her dreams with him everywhere he went. Another photo. Dean's first business pitch. He was standing in front of a room full of investors, wearing a suit Dorothy had altered herself because they couldn't afford a tailor. He looked terrified and determined in equal measure. Dorothy had been in the audience, silently cheering him on. He had failed that pitch. The lead investor had laughed at him, actually laughed, and said, "You're nobody, kid. Come back when you have a real track record." Dean had walked out of that building destroyed. Dorothy had found him sitting on the curb outside, his head in his hands. She sat down beside him and took his hand. "You're not nobody," she had said fiercely. "You're Dean Brando, and you're going to prove them all wrong." "How do you know?" Dean had asked, his voice small and broken. "Because I know you. I see you, and you're extraordinary." Dean had kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of love. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes," he had whispered against her lips. "Then let it scare you," Dorothy had whispered back. "I'm not going anywhere." But something had changed that day. Dorothy could see it now, looking back with the clarity of hindsight. That was the day Dean started believing he had to prove something. That was the day he started measuring his worth by what other people thought instead of what he knew to be true. The next photo showed Dean's first successful deal. He had landed a small contract, nothing huge, but it was real money, enough to start growing. They had celebrated at the same pizza place where they had gotten engaged, because that's what they did. They celebrated every victory at that pizza place. But Dean had been different that night. He kept checking his phone, worried about what investors thought, whether the news had reached the right people, whether he was being talked about yet. "Dean, we're celebrating," Dorothy had said gently. "Put the phone away." I know," he had said, putting it down, but he picked it up again 5 minutes later. More photos, Dean's second deal, his third, his expansion into a second city. With each success, something in him shifted. He started talking differently, dressing differently, walking differently. He started talking about status and reputation and market position. Dorothy had told herself it was just the stress of growth. She had told herself that the man she married was still in there somewhere, just buried under ambition and pressure. She had been lying to herself. The photos showed it clearly. In the early pictures, Dean looked at Dorothy like she hung the moon. By the later pictures, he barely looked at her at all. His eyes were always on the next deal, the next opportunity, the next rung on the ladder he was climbing toward nothing. Their wedding anniversary dinner, the year everything changed. Dorothy had dressed up, made reservations at Dean's favorite restaurant, hoped for a night that felt like old times. Dean had shown up late, taken a phone call during appetizers, and left before dessert to handle a business emergency. "I'm sorry," he had said, kissing her forehead like she was a child. "You understand, right? This deal is important." "I'm important," Dorothy had said quietly. Dean had already been walking away. She wasn't sure he had heard her. The last photo in the box was from their 10th anniversary party. Dean had thrown a massive event at an expensive venue, inviting business contacts and investors and society people Dorothy didn't know. He had given a speech thanking everyone for helping him build his empire. He hadn't mentioned Dorothy once, not once. She was in the background of the photo, standing alone by the window, watching her husband shine for strangers. She looked lost. She looked like a ghost. That was the night Dorothy had gone home and opened her laptop. She had accessed accounts she hadn't touched since college, trust funds she had locked away, investments her mother had left her before she died. She had remembered who she was before she became Dean's wife, and she had started protecting him. Anonymously, carefully, she had invested in his business through shell companies. She had arranged partnerships through intermediaries. She had opened doors while letting him believe he was kicking them down himself, because she had loved him, because she had believed the real Dean was still in there somewhere, because she had been a fool. Dorothy closed the box of photographs and carried it to the living room. She sat on the expensive couch Dean had chosen and allowed herself to cry. Not for Dean. Not anymore. She cried for herself. For the woman in those early photos who had believed love was enough, who had given up everything to choose her own happiness and had ended up with nothing. Her phone, still silenced, lit up with a new message. Against her better judgment, Dorothy checked it. It was from Dean. "Please come home. We need to talk." I didn't know. How could I have known? Please. Dorothy stared at the message. Home. He still called the penthouse home, like it was a place they shared, like they were still a team. He didn't understand that home had stopped existing years ago. She typed back, "My lawyer will contact you tomorrow." Another message came through immediately. "Dorothy, please. Don't do this. I love you." She almost threw the phone. Instead, she took a screenshot of the message and sent it to her lawyer with a note. "Document everything. I want a complete record." Because Dean didn't love her. He loved the idea of controlling her, of keeping her small so he could feel big. And now that he knew who she really was, he loved the idea of having access to her money and power. But he had never loved her, not the real her. He had loved the version of her that asked nothing and expected less. Dorothy picked up the box of photographs one last time. She looked at the young couple eating pizza and laughing, and she whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." Then she carried the box to the fireplace, turned on the gas flame, and fed the photographs to the fire, one by one. She watched Dean's smiling face curl and blacken. She watched their tiny apartment burn. She watched their dreams turn to ash. When the box was empty and the fire was full of ashes, Dorothy stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Dean was panicking. Somewhere out there, the society people were gossiping. Somewhere out there, her father was probably reading about her on the news and regretting every word he had said. Dorothy didn't care about any of it. She cared about one thing only. She was finally free. Her phone buzzed one more time, a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "I saw what happened tonight at the gala. I was the man sitting alone at table 17. I know you don't know me, but I know what you're going through. When you're ready to talk to someone who understands, call me. No pressure, no agenda, just someone who's been where you are. James Rothwell." Dorothy stared at the message. She didn't know a James Rothwell. She didn't know anyone at table 17, but something about the message felt genuine in a way nothing else had in years. She saved the number and turned off her phone. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and divorce papers and the systematic dismantling of everything she had built with Dean. Tonight, she just wanted to sit in the silence and remember how to be herself again. Outside, the city lights glittered like false promises. Inside, Dorothy sat in the darkness and felt, for the first time in years, like she might survive this after all. Chapter 3. The Fall from Grace. Dean Brando had never understood the concept of rock bottom until he was living in it. The apartment was small, smaller than the first place he had shared with Dorothy all those years ago, but without any of the charm or hope. It was a furnished rental in a neighborhood he would have sneered at last month, with thin walls and a kitchen that smelled like the previous tenant's cooking. He sat on the worn couch and stared at the stack of papers his lawyer had just delivered. Divorce papers, asset division requests, a restraining order preventing him from contacting Dorothy except through legal representation. How did this happen? He asked the empty room. But he knew. He had watched the video clips from the gala 100 times, watched himself mock his wife while she stood there taking it, watched her reveal who she really was, watched his entire world implode in real time. The internet had been merciless. The videos had gone viral. Everyone had an opinion about the arrogant husband who had humiliated his billionaire heiress wife. The comments were brutal. He really thought he was the prize. Imagine being that blind. She's better off without him. But worse than the internet's judgment was the silence from everyone who had called themselves his friends. His phone used to buzz constantly with lunch invitations, golf outings, networking opportunities. Now it sat silent on the coffee table, a dead weight of irrelevance. His business partners had called an emergency meeting yesterday. Dean had arrived expecting support, maybe even sympathy. Instead, he had walked into an ambush. "We need to talk about the company's direction," Marcus, his lead investor, had said without preamble. "We've done some digging, Dean. It's interesting. Every major deal you've closed, every expansion that succeeded, every partnership that materialized, they all have one thing in common." Dean's stomach had dropped. "What are you talking about?" "They all connect back to Taylor Ashford Holdings," Marcus had continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Shell companies, anonymous investors, mysterious partnerships. It was all her, Dean. Your wife built your empire, and you never even knew it." The folder had contained proof, transaction records, corporate filings, investment documents. Dorothy's fingerprints were everywhere, carefully hidden but undeniable once you knew to look. She had been the ghost in his machine, the invisible hand guiding his success, and he had taken all the credit while treating her like she was worthless. "So here's the situation," Marcus had said, his voice cold. "We invested in Dean Brando, the self-made success story. Turns out that was fiction. The real power was always your wife, and from what we're seeing online, you've thoroughly burned that bridge. So why exactly should we keep funding you?" Dean had stammered, tried to explain, tried to salvage something, but there was nothing to salvage. By the end of the meeting, Marcus and 2 other major investors had pulled out. Dean's business empire, the thing he had sacrificed his marriage to build, was collapsing faster than he could comprehend. He had called his lawyer in a panic. "Sue her. She can't just destroy my business like this. There has to be something we can do." His lawyer had sighed. "Mr. Brando, she hasn't done anything illegal. Your investors made their own choices. Your business partners are making their own decisions. Mrs. Taylor Ashford hasn't issued a single statement about you or your business. She's been completely silent." That was somehow worse. Dorothy wasn't even fighting him. She had simply removed herself from his life, and the house of cards he had built came tumbling down on its own. Dean's country club membership had been suspended pending review. His reservation at his favorite restaurant had been mysteriously lost. The society people who had hung on his every word now looked through him like he was invisible. He had become what he had always feared most, nobody. His bank account was dwindling fast, the penthouse he could no longer afford. The car lease was up for cancellation, the lifestyle he had built was vanishing like morning fog, and beneath it was just Dean, alone with the man he had become. A knock on the door startled him. He wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody knew where he was living except his lawyer and his younger brother. Dean opened the door to find his mother standing there, her face set in lines of disappointment he remembered from childhood. "Hi, Ma," he said quietly. "Dean," she said, walking past him into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. She looked around at the sparse space, the divorce papers on the coffee table, the half-empty bottle of whiskey he had bought yesterday and hadn't opened yet. Her expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "I raised you better than this." "I know," Dean said, closing the door. His mother sat on the couch, picked up the divorce papers and scanned them quickly. "She's not even asking for alimony. She's offering to let you keep everything you earned. Do you understand what that means?" Dean nodded miserably. It meant Dorothy didn't need anything from him. It meant she wanted nothing to do with him. It meant the final door was closing. "Do you know what your father would say if he were still alive?" his mother asked. "That I'm a disappointment," Dean answered. "No," his mother said sharply. "He would say that you forgot where you came from. Your father worked in a factory his entire life. He came home every night with his hands dirty and his back aching. And you know what he taught you? That a man's worth isn't what he owns, it's how he treats people, especially the people he loves." Dean felt tears burning his eyes. "I messed up, Ma. I messed up so bad." "Yes, you did," his mother agreed. "That girl loved you with everything she had. I saw it at your wedding. I saw it every time she looked at you, and you threw it away chasing something that was never real." "I thought I needed to be someone," Dean said, his voice breaking. "I thought I needed to prove myself." "To who?" his mother demanded. "To investors? To country club snobs? To people who don't give a damn about you? Dean, you were already someone. You were Dorothy's husband. You were a good man building a good life. That should have been enough." "It wasn't enough for me," Dean whispered. His mother stood up, her face hard again. "Then you need to figure out why, because until you do, you'll never be enough for yourself, and you'll keep hurting everyone who loves you." She walked to the door, paused, and looked back at him. "Dorothy deserves better than what you gave her. I hope someday you become the kind of man who deserves better too. But that's on you now, not her." After she left, Dean sat in the silence of his cheap apartment and let himself feel the full weight of what he had lost. Not the money, or the status, or the business. Those things had never been real anyway. He had lost Dorothy. He had lost the only person who had ever loved him for who he actually was, and he had lost her by forgetting who he actually was. His phone buzzed. A text from his younger brother Carlos. "I heard about Ma's visit. You need anything?" Dean typed back. "I need to figure out how I became this person." Carlos replied, "Then maybe it's time to start over." Like really start over. Remember who you were before you got rich. Dean looked around his apartment. He had no more investors, no more fancy dinners, no more people pretending to be his friends because he was useful. He was broke, disgraced, and alone. He was nobody. Maybe that was what he needed to be. The next morning, Dean stood outside a factory on the industrial side of town. It was the same factory where he had worked part-time during college, hauling boxes and operating machinery for minimum wage. He had sworn he would never go back to a place like this, that he was meant for bigger things. Now he walked through the doors and asked if they were hiring. The manager looked at him skeptically. "Aren't you that guy from the news? The one whose billionaire wife left him?" Dean's face burned. "Yeah, that's me." "Why would someone like you want to work here?" "Because I need to remember what real work feels like," Dean said honestly. "I need to remember who I was before I became someone I'm not proud of." The manager studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Night shift, warehouse work. It's hard, it's honest, and it pays by the hour. You think you can handle that?" "Yes," Dean said. "I can handle that." He started that night. The work was exactly as hard as he remembered, maybe harder, because he had spent years in air-conditioned offices and soft chairs. His hands ached, his back screamed, his co-workers recognized him and whispered behind his back. But something shifted in Dean that first night. As he lifted boxes and moved inventory and felt his muscles remember what labor actually meant, he started to understand something he had forgotten. This work mattered. These people mattered. The man he used to be, before the desperation for status consumed him, had known that. During his lunch break, Dean sat on a loading dock and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through old photos until he found one from his wedding day. Dorothy was laughing at something, her face radiant with joy, her dress from a thrift store, but her happiness worth more than any designer label. And Dean, young and broke and full of genuine love, was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Who was that guy? Dean whispered to the photo. How do I find him again? A co-worker sat down next to him. Older guy, maybe 60, with the weathered hands of someone who had worked hard his entire life. Rough night? Rough life, Dean admitted. The co-worker nodded. I saw the videos. You really screwed up, huh? Completely, Dean said. You gonna try to win her back? Dean thought about it. He thought about Dorothy's face at the gala, the way she had looked at him with such calm, final disappointment. He thought about the divorce papers sitting on his coffee table. He thought about everything he had destroyed. No, he said finally. I think I need to figure out how to win myself back first. The co-worker smiled. Smart man. That's the only person worth fighting for anyway. Dean finished his shift and went home as the sun rose. He was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Clarity. He had a long way to go. He had become someone terrible, someone he didn't recognize, and undoing that damage would take time and work and painful honesty. But for the first time since the gala, Dean felt like maybe, eventually, he could look at himself in the mirror without feeling disgust. Not for Dorothy, not to win her back, but because he owed it to himself to become someone worth respecting. He pulled out his phone and searched for therapists who offered sliding scale fees. He found one who had evening appointments that would fit around his factory schedule. He booked the first session and sent the confirmation to Carlos with a simple message. Starting over. Carlos replied immediately, Proud of you, man. One step at a time. Dean put the phone down and looked at the divorce papers still sitting on his coffee table. He picked them up, read through them one more time, and then did something he should have done weeks ago. He signed them. Not because he wanted the divorce, but because Dorothy deserved to be free of him. She deserved to move forward without the weight of his failures dragging her down. And he deserved to rebuild himself without using her as a crutch or an excuse. He put the signed papers in an envelope, addressed it to her lawyer, and walked to the post office as the city woke up around him. When he dropped the envelope in the mailbox, it felt like closing a door on the worst version of himself. Now he just had to figure out who was on the other side. Chapter 4. The Coffee Shop. 3 months of silence can feel like an eternity or a heartbeat, depending on what you're healing from. Dorothy had spent those months in a space between grief and liberation. She had signed the divorce papers without hesitation, divided assets with clinical precision, and dismantled a marriage as methodically as one might disassemble furniture. But dismantling a marriage wasn't the same as healing from one, and the empty spaces in her life echoed louder than she had expected. She woke up in her new apartment, smaller than the penthouse but entirely hers, filled with things she had chosen, decorated in colors she actually liked. No more white and grey minimalism that Dean had insisted was sophisticated. Her bedroom was painted deep blue, her living room had bookshelves overflowing with novels, her kitchen had mismatched mugs she had collected from thrift stores, each one making her smile. It was perfect, it was hers, and she was lonely. Her phone buzzed, a text from her lawyer. Divorce finalized. It's done, Dorothy. You're officially free. Free. The word should have felt victorious. Instead, it felt hollow. Dorothy sat on her couch and allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been avoiding. She missed being married. Not to Dean, not anymore, but she missed the idea of partnership. She missed having someone to come home to, someone to share small moments with, someone who cared about her day. She missed being loved, even though she had never really had it. Her phone buzzed again. The number she had saved months ago, the one that had sent her that message the night of the gala. James Rothwell. He had texted her 3 times since that night, always brief, always respectful, never pushing. The first text had come a week after the gala. Hope you're doing okay. No need to respond, just wanted you to know someone's thinking of you. The second came a month later. Saw an article about your foundation announcement. Beautiful work. You're building something meaningful. The third was today. Coffee, no pressure, no agenda, just thought you might want to talk to someone who's been where you are. The Blue Door Cafe on Marshall Street. I'll be there at 10 tomorrow. If you come, great. If not, no hard feelings. James. Dorothy stared at the message. She didn't know this man. She didn't know what he wanted. But something about his messages felt genuine, patient, respectful. And she was so tired of being alone with her thoughts. She typed back, "I'll be there." The Blue Door Cafe was a small place tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, the kind of neighborhood spot that survived on regulars and locals rather than Instagram tourists. Dorothy arrived at 10 exactly, nervous in a way she hadn't felt in years. James Rothwell sat at a corner table by the window. He was older than she expected, maybe late 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, nothing flashy, nothing designed to impress. When he saw her, he stood up and smiled, and the smile reached his eyes. "Dorothy," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I know it was a gamble meeting a stranger." "A calculated gamble," Dorothy said, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm, not trying to prove anything. "I looked you up. You own the Rothwell hotel chain." "Impressive." "I've been lucky," James said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "And I've made enough mistakes to fill several lifetimes. Coffee? They make an excellent cappuccino here." They ordered coffee, and for the first few minutes, made small talk about the cafe, the neighborhood, the weather. Then James set down his cup and looked at her directly. "I should probably explain why I texted you," he said. "I was at the gala that night. Table 17, like I said. I saw what your husband did. I saw you walk out with more grace than most people could manage, and I recognized something in your face." "What did you recognize?" Dorothy asked quietly. "The look of someone who just realized they've been living a lie," James said. "I had that same look once. My wife, my ex-wife now, she was the one who called me out on it. We were at a business dinner, much like your gala. I was holding court, talking about my success, my vision, my accomplishments, and she just stood up in the middle of my speech and left." Dorothy leaned forward. "What did you do?" "I followed her, furious," James said. "I demanded to know what her problem was, and she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. 'Your problem isn't that you forgot about me. It's that you forgot about you. The man I married cared about building something meaningful. The man you've become only cares about being seen.'" She filed for divorce the next week. "Did you fight it?" Dorothy asked. "I tried," James admitted. "I was angry, defensive, convinced she was wrong. I spent 6 months fighting the divorce, trying to prove she was the problem, not me. And then one night I was alone in my penthouse, surrounded by expensive things I didn't care about, and I realized she was right. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't even like." "What did you do?" "I signed the papers," James said. "I went to therapy. I took a year off from work and traveled, not to luxury resorts, but to small towns and villages where nobody knew my name. I volunteered. I helped build houses. I taught English to kids in a small school in Costa Rica. I remembered what it felt like to be human instead of a brand." Dorothy felt tears prickling her eyes. "Did you ever talk to your ex-wife again?" "Yes," James said. "Years later. She had remarried by then, had a child, looked genuinely happy. I thanked her for having the courage to leave me. She said something I think about all the time. 'I didn't leave you to hurt you. I left you so you could find yourself again. And I left me so I could remember what love actually feels like.'" A tear escaped down Dorothy's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but James saw. "Sorry," she said. "I thought I was done crying about this." "Grief doesn't work on a schedule," James said gently. "It shows up when it needs to. There's no shame in that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Dorothy said, "Why did you reach out to me? What do you want?" "Honestly," James said, "I don't want anything. I saw someone going through something I went through, and I thought maybe it would help to know you're not alone. That there's life on the other side of this. That you can rebuild and be happy and become someone you're proud of again." "Are you happy?" Dorothy asked. James considered. "Most days, yes. I'm happier than I was when I was married and miserable. I'm building things that matter now. Hotels that employ local communities, that support small businesses, that create opportunities instead of just profit. I have friends who actually know me, not just the resume version. I sleep well at night. That's worth more than any amount of money. Dorothy smiled for the first time since entering the cafe. That does sound nice. It is, James said, and I believe you'll find your version of it. You're already starting. I read about your foundation, the work you're doing to help women rebuild their lives. That's not the work of someone broken. That's the work of someone finding purpose. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. James told her about his hotels, his travels, his daughter from a previous relationship who was now a marine biologist studying coral reefs. Dorothy told him about her childhood, her father's controlling nature, her choice to hide her identity when she married Dean. Do you regret it? James asked. Hiding who you were? I regret that it didn't matter, Dorothy said. I thought if he loved me for me, without the money complicating things, it would be pure, real. But love doesn't work like that. Real love sees all of you and values all of you. I was testing him without telling him it was a test, and that wasn't fair to either of us. That's very self-aware, James observed. 3 months of therapy will do that, Dorothy said wryly. My therapist says I have a pattern of making myself smaller to make other people comfortable. We're working on it, James laughed. Good. The world has enough people taking up too much space. We need more people taking up the space they actually deserve. They exchanged phone numbers before leaving, and James walked her to her car. Can I ask you something? Dorothy said before getting in. Of course. Why aren't you married now? If you figured everything out and became this better person, why are you alone? James smiled. Who says I'm alone? I have friends, family, a life I love. I'm not married because I haven't met anyone who makes me want to be, and I'm okay with that. I'd rather be happy alone than miserable with the wrong person. But if the right person comes along, someone who sees me and lets me see them, I'd be open to it. I'm just not searching desperately for it. Dorothy nodded. She understood that. Thank you for today. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Anytime, James said. Really, call me if you need a friend. No expectations, no hidden agenda, just friendship. Dorothy drove home feeling lighter than she had in months. She had made a friend, a real friend who understood what she was going through because he had lived it. Someone who had survived the same kind of loss and come out the other side whole. When she got home, she found a letter in her mailbox. Her lawyer had forwarded it from Dean. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of her. Inside was a single piece of paper with Dean's handwriting. Dorothy, I signed the divorce papers. I'm not writing to ask for anything or to try to change your mind. I'm writing because I owe you an apology that isn't about me. I'm sorry I stopped seeing you. I'm sorry I made you feel small to make myself feel big. I'm sorry I took everything you gave me and treated it like it meant nothing. You deserved better than what I gave you. I'm working on becoming the kind of person who would deserve you, not to win you back, but because I can't live with who I became. I hope you find everything you're looking for. I hope someone loves you the way you deserve to be loved. Dean. Dorothy read the letter twice. It didn't change anything. It didn't make her want him back or forgive him completely. But it felt like a door closing properly this time, with both of them on the other side of it, acknowledging what had happened. She folded the letter and put it in a drawer. Then she pulled out her phone and texted James. Thank you again for today. Same time next week? He replied immediately. It's a date. Well, not a date. You know what I mean. I'll bring my famous coffee shop wisdom. You bring your amazing perspective. Deal? Dorothy smiled. Deal. She went to bed that night feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Chapter 5. The healing begins. Friendship, Dorothy discovered, was easier than romance and more powerful than she had remembered. Over the following weeks, she and James fell into a comfortable rhythm. Coffee every Wednesday morning at the Blue Door Cafe. Sometimes they talked about heavy things, her marriage, his past, the work of rebuilding yourself after breaking. Other times they talked about nothing important at all. Books they were reading, shows they were watching, debates about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. James never pushed. He never asked invasive questions. He simply listened when she needed to talk and filled the silence with easy conversation when she didn't. It was the most uncomplicated relationship Dorothy had ever had with a man, and she treasured it. "I have a question," James said one Wednesday morning. They had been meeting for over a month now, and Dorothy had started to think of this table by the window as theirs. "What do you actually want to do? Not what you think you should do, not what sounds impressive. What makes you excited to wake up in the morning?" Dorothy stirred her cappuccino, considering. "I don't know if I've ever asked myself that question." "Then maybe it's time to start," James said gently. That conversation stayed with Dorothy all week. What did she want? She had money she could never spend in 10 lifetimes. She had freedom she was still learning how to use. But what did she actually want to build with all that freedom and resources? The answer came to her on a Saturday afternoon. She was walking past a community center when she saw a flyer. Support group for women leaving difficult relationships. On impulse, she went inside. The meeting was in a small room with mismatched chairs arranged in a circle. 12 women sat there, ranging in age from early 20s to late 60s. Some looked shell-shocked. Others looked determined. All of them looked tired. "We have a visitor," the group leader said kindly. "Would you like to introduce yourself?" "I'm Dorothy," she said, taking an empty seat. "I recently left my marriage. I thought maybe I could help or learn or just listen." What she heard in that room broke her heart and rebuilt it at the same time. Women who had been made to feel worthless. Women who had given up careers, dreams, identities to make their partners happy. Women who were brilliant and strong and had forgotten they were either of those things. One woman, maybe 30 years old with tired eyes, said, "I have a degree in engineering, but my husband convinced me I wasn't smart enough to work in the field. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 8 years. Now I'm leaving, and I don't even know who I am anymore." Dorothy felt that in her bones. "You're still an engineer," she said quietly. "Your degree didn't expire. Your intelligence didn't vanish. You just forgot how to see it." The woman looked at her with something like hope. "How do you remember?" "One day at a time," Dorothy said, "and with people who remind you until you can remind yourself." After the meeting, the woman approached her. "I'm Rachel. Thank you for what you said. It helped more than you know." "Can I ask you something?" Dorothy said. "If you could have anything to help you restart your career, what would it be?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "Money for childcare, so I could go back to school for my master's degree. Confidence that I'm not too old or too out of practice. Someone who believes in me. Take your pick. They're all impossible." "What if they weren't?" Dorothy asked. That night, Dorothy called James. "I need your help with something. Can we meet tomorrow?" They met at the cafe on Sunday morning, and Dorothy told him everything. About the support group, about Rachel, about the dozen women in that room who needed resources and encouragement, and someone to believe in them. "I want to build something," Dorothy said. "Not a charity that throws money at problems, a real program. Education funding, career counseling, childcare support, mental health resources, job placement, a complete system to help women rebuild their lives from scratch." James was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "That's a beautiful vision. How can I help?" "You've rebuilt hotels in struggling communities," Dorothy said. "You understand how to create systems that actually work, not just good intentions that fall apart. I have the money and the passion. I need your experience." "You have it," James said without hesitation, "but I have one condition." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "This has to be truly yours," James said. "I'll help, but I won't take over. I won't make decisions for you. This is your vision, and you need to be the one driving it. Deal?" Dorothy felt something shift in her chest. Dean would have taken over immediately, convinced he knew better. James was offering support while insisting she stay in control. That was the difference between partnership and possession. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. James shook it, and they both started laughing at the formality. Over the next few weeks, they worked together on the foundation. James introduced her to architects, community organizers, and people who had built successful programs. Dorothy met with lawyers, accountants, and social workers to understand the needs and the gaps in existing services. She went back to the support group every week, not as a donor, but as a participant. She listened to stories. She learned what these women actually needed versus what people assumed they needed. She built trust. Rachel became the first recipient of the Foundation's education program. Dorothy funded her master's degree, arranged childcare, and connected her with a mentor in her field. Watching Rachel's face light up when she enrolled in classes was worth more than any business success Dorothy had ever achieved. "You gave me my life back," Rachel said, crying in Dorothy's arms. "No," Dorothy corrected gently. "You gave yourself your life back. I just helped with the logistics." One evening, after a foundation planning meeting, James and Dorothy sat on a bench outside the office building, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Can I tell you something?" Dorothy asked. "Always," James said. "I'm happy," Dorothy said, surprised by her own words. "I wake up excited about the work we're doing. I go to bed feeling like I made a difference. I'm happy, and I didn't even realize it until just now." James smiled. "That's usually how it works. Happiness sneaks up on you when you're not desperately chasing it." "Thank you," Dorothy said, "for being my friend, for helping me build this, for not making me feel stupid for not knowing what I wanted." "You never needed me to tell you what you wanted," James said. "You just needed space to hear yourself think. I'm honored you let me be part of this journey." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then James said, "I have a confession to make." Dorothy's heart skipped. "Okay?" "I'm falling in love with you," James said quietly. "Not in a desperate, possessive way. Just in the way you fall for someone when you realize they make everything better just by being themselves. But I need you to know something important. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything. I'm telling you because I promised myself I'd never hide how I feel from someone I care about again. If you want to stay friends, we stay friends. If you need space, I'll give you space. Your happiness matters more to me than my feelings." Dorothy's breath caught. She looked at James, really looked at him. This man who had shown her what respect looked like. This man who had supported her vision without trying to control it. This man who was confessing his feelings while simultaneously releasing any claim on her response. "I don't know what I feel," Dorothy said honestly. "I'm still healing. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being someone's wife. But I can tell you this. Whatever we're building here, friendship or something more, it feels real in a way nothing has felt real in a very long time." "That's enough," James said. "That's more than enough." "Can I ask you something?" Dorothy said. "Will you wait? Not indefinitely, not like you're on hold, but will you let this be whatever it becomes naturally?" "I've been alone for years," James said. "I'm good at being alone, but I'm also good at being patient. So, yes, I'll wait. Not because I'm waiting for you to make a decision, but because whatever this becomes, I want it to be right. Not rushed, not forced, not built on need or loneliness or trying to fix each other. Just two whole people choosing each other." Dorothy leaned her head on his shoulder. "How did you get so wise?" "Therapy and failure," James said, making her laugh. "Lots of both." They sat there as the sun set completely and the streetlights flickered on. Dorothy felt safe in a way she had never felt with Dean. Not because James was protecting her, but because he trusted her to protect herself and simply chose to sit beside her while she did. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Dorothy, it's Rachel. I got an internship. They loved my resume. I start next month. I can't believe this is happening. Thank you doesn't even begin to cover what you've given me." Dorothy showed James the message. "This is what it's all about," she said. "This right here." "You're changing lives," James said. "Never underestimate the power of that." They walked to their cars together, and before they parted, James hugged her. It was the first time they had hugged, and it felt different than any hug Dorothy had ever experienced. It felt like coming home to a home she was still building, one moment at a time. Same time next week? James asked. Always, Dorothy said. She drove home with the windows down, letting the cool evening air clear her head. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She almost didn't check it, but something made her look. It was from Dean. I saw the announcement about your foundation. It's beautiful work. You're doing what you were always meant to do. I'm proud of you. Not that my pride matters, but I wanted you to know. Dean. Dorothy stared at the message for a long moment. Then she did something she never thought she would do. She replied, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well too." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was closure. It was the acknowledgement that they had both moved forward, both changed, both survived. She fell asleep that night thinking about James's words, two whole people choosing each other. For the first time in her life, Dorothy felt like she was becoming whole. Not someone's wife, not someone's daughter, not someone's anything. Just Dorothy, figuring out who she wanted to be, one day at a time. Chapter 6. The moment of choice. The panic attack hit Dorothy in the middle of the supermarket on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She had been reaching for coffee, the same brand she used to buy for Dean, when suddenly her chest tightened. Her vision tunneled. Her hands started shaking so badly she dropped the container and it burst open on the floor, coffee grounds scattering everywhere. "Ma'am! Ma'am, are you okay?" A store employee's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Dorothy couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she could feel was overwhelming terror and a desperate need to escape. She ran out of the store, leaving her shopping cart behind, and found herself sitting on the curb outside, gasping for air and crying without knowing why. Her phone was in her hand. She didn't remember taking it out. She scrolled through contacts with trembling fingers and called the first person her brain connected to safety. "Dorothy," James answered on the first ring. "Hey, what's up?" "I can't breathe," Dorothy gasped. "I don't know what's happening. I can't breathe." "Okay, listen to my voice," James said, his tone calm and steady. "Where are you right now?" "Supermarket, outside, I don't know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called." "Don't apologize," James said firmly. "I'm glad you called. Now listen carefully. Can you feel your feet on the ground?" "What?" Dorothy was confused, still gulping air. "Your feet. Can you feel them touching the ground?" Dorothy focused on her feet. "Yes. Good. Now breathe with me. In through your nose for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you do that with me?" Dorothy tried. The first few attempts were shaky, but James kept counting, kept breathing with her, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. Slowly, painfully slowly, her chest loosened. The tunnel vision receded. She could see the parking lot clearly again. "That's it," James said gently. "You're doing great. Keep breathing with me." After a few minutes, Dorothy could speak normally again. "What just happened to me?" "Panic attack," James said. "I've had a few myself. They're terrifying, but they can't actually hurt you. Where exactly are you? I'm coming to get you." "No, you don't have to," Dorothy protested weakly. "I know I don't have to," James said. "I want to. Send me your location. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He was there in 12. Dorothy was still sitting on the curb when his car pulled up. James got out, sat down next to her without a word, and simply put his arm around her shoulders. They sat there for a while, watching people come and go with their groceries, living their normal lives that felt impossible to Dorothy right now. "I thought I was fine," Dorothy finally said. "I thought I was healing. I thought I was moving forward." "You are," James said. "Healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you're fine for weeks, and then you're sitting on a curb outside a supermarket having a breakdown. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human." "I don't want to be this broken," Dorothy whispered. "You're not broken," James said firmly. "You're processing trauma. There's a difference. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from hurt that already happened. It's actually a sign that you're feeling safe enough to finally let the emotions out." Dorothy leaned against him. "How do you know all this?" "Therapy," James said. years of it after my divorce. My therapist explained that when you're in survival mode, you don't have time to process emotions. You just react and cope and keep going. But when you finally feel safe, all those suppressed emotions come flooding back. It's brutal, but it's also healing. I hate it, Dorothy said. I know, James said, but I promise it gets better. Not easier, but better. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then James said, "Do you want to talk about what triggered it?" Dorothy told him about the coffee, about how seeing it had suddenly made her remember all the mornings she had made Dean's coffee exactly how he liked it, while he barely acknowledged her presence. How she had been such a small part of his morning routine, and he had been the entire center of hers. How she had poured love into every mundane task, and he had taken it all as his due. "I thought I was over it," Dorothy said. "I thought I had processed this." "Maybe there are layers," James suggested. "Maybe you processed the big hurt, and now you're getting to the smaller ones. The death by 1,000 cuts kind of hurt." Dorothy nodded. That made sense. "I'm tired of crying about him. I'm tired of letting him take up space in my head." "Then maybe it's time to take a real break," James said. "Not from your foundation work, not from your life, but from the pace you've been keeping. When's the last time you did nothing?" Dorothy couldn't remember. Since leaving Dean, she had thrown herself into building the foundation, attending therapy, helping Rachel and the other women, meeting with James for coffee and planning sessions. She had been running at full speed, too afraid to stop because stopping meant feeling. "I have a suggestion," James said. "Take a month, real time off, no foundation work, no meetings, no obligations, just time to exist and heal and figure out what you want." "I can't just disappear," Dorothy protested. "Why not?" James asked. "The foundation will still be there, Rachel will still be there, I'll still be there, but you need to be there for yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup, Dorothy, and right now you're running on empty." "Where would I even go?" "I have a cabin," James said. "Up in the mountains. It's small, simple, completely off the grid. No internet, no cell service, just you and nature and silence. I go there when I need to reset. You're welcome to use it." Dorothy felt panic rising again. "Completely alone?" "Not if you don't want to be," James said. "You could bring a friend, or I could check on you once a week, bring supplies, make sure you're okay. Whatever you need to feel safe, but still get the space to heal." Dorothy thought about it. The idea of being alone terrified her, but the idea of continuing at this pace terrified her more. "Would you really check on me?" "Every week," James promised, "or every day if you need it. Whatever helps." "Okay," Dorothy said slowly. "I'll do it. 1 month, but I need to wrap up some foundation business first." 2 weeks, James said. "Wrap everything up in 2 weeks, then go. Don't give yourself time to talk yourself out of it." They drove back to Dorothy's apartment in James's car. He insisted on coming up with her, making sure she was okay and cooking her dinner even though she protested she wasn't hungry. "You're eating anyway," James said, pulling out pasta and vegetables from her fridge. "Panic attacks burn through a lot of energy. Your body needs fuel." While he cooked, Dorothy sat at her kitchen counter and watched this man move through her space with easy familiarity. He wasn't trying to fix her or save her. He was just being present, offering support without smothering her, giving help without making her feel helpless. "James," she said suddenly. He was stirring pasta sauce, his back to her. "Why are you so good at this?" He turned, surprised. "At what?" "At knowing what I need, at being there without being overwhelming, at helping without making me feel weak." James set down the spoon and came to sit across from her at the counter. "Because someone did it for me once. After my divorce, I fell apart, completely fell apart, and I had a friend, Sarah, who just showed up. She brought groceries. She dragged me to therapy. She sat with me while I cried. She never tried to fix me. She just kept showing up until I could fix myself. When she died 2 years ago, I promised myself I would be that person for someone else if I ever got the chance. So this isn't about you owing me anything. This is about me paying forward the kindness I received." Dorothy felt tears welling up again, but they were different this time. Not tears of pain, but of gratitude. Sarah sounds like she was an amazing person. She was, James said, smiling. She would have loved you. She had the same kind of quiet strength you have, the kind that looks soft until you realize it's made of steel. They ate dinner together, talking about nothing important. James told her about the cabin, about the hiking trails nearby, about the lake where you could see stars so clearly it felt like you could reach out and touch them. He told her about the silence there, how it was scary at first but eventually became peaceful. "Promise me something," James said as he was leaving that night. "What?" "If you're up there and you're struggling, you'll call me. Even if there's no cell service at the cabin, drive to the nearest town and call. Don't suffer alone." "I promise," Dorothy said. She hugged him, holding on a little longer than usual. "Thank you for today, for coming when I called, for not making me feel crazy." "You're not crazy," James said. "You're healing. There's a world of difference." After he left, Dorothy sat in her apartment and thought about the month ahead. Part of her was terrified. Part of her was relieved. All of her was exhausted. She called her therapist and scheduled an emergency session for the next day. She called the foundation office and told them she would be unreachable for a month. She called Rachel, who was supportive and encouraging. "You've given so much to all of us," Rachel said. "It's time to give to yourself." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Dorothy wrapped up foundation business, delegated responsibilities, ensured everything would run smoothly in her absence. She packed for the cabin, simple clothes and books and a journal her therapist had recommended. On her last therapy session before leaving, her therapist said something that stayed with her. "You've spent your whole life being what other people needed. Your father needed you to be obedient. Dean needed you to be small. The foundation women need you to be strong. Maybe it's time to figure out what Dorothy needs Dorothy to be." The night before she left, James came over with supplies for the cabin. He drew her a map, showed her where everything was, gave her emergency numbers for the ranger station and the nearest town clinic. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," Dorothy admitted. "What if I get up there and I can't handle it? What if the silence is too much?" "Then you come back," James said simply. "This isn't prison, Dorothy. It's a choice. You can leave any time. But I think you're stronger than you believe you are. I think you'll surprise yourself." "Will you miss me?" Dorothy asked, then immediately felt stupid for asking. But James just smiled. "Every day. But I'll be happy knowing you're taking care of yourself. That's more important than my missing you." The next morning, Dorothy packed her car and drove toward the mountains. In her rearview mirror, the city grew smaller and smaller. In front of her, the road stretched empty and full of possibility. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her adult life, and while that terrified her, it also felt like freedom. Chapter 7. The Awakening. The cabin was exactly as James had described, small, simple, and surrounded by silence, so profound it felt like a physical presence. Dorothy stood on the wooden porch for a long time before going inside, just listening. Birds sang, wind moved through pine trees, a stream gurgled somewhere nearby. There were no car horns, no sirens, no human voices, just nature breathing its ancient rhythm. Inside, the cabin was one large room with a loft bed, a small kitchen, a wood stove, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest. It was rustic but clean, with touches that spoke of James's presence. Books on a shelf, firewood stacked neatly by the stove, a note on the table. "Dorothy, welcome to my favorite place on earth. The wood stove is temperamental but responds well to patience. The hiking trail behind the cabin leads to the lake about an hour's walk. The nearest town is 40 minutes east if you need anything. But mostly, I hope you don't need anything except this silence. Remember, healing isn't pretty, it isn't linear, and it isn't fast. Be patient with yourself. I'll check on you next week. James." Dorothy smiled at the note, then felt tears starting again. She had cried more in the past few months than in the previous 10 years combined. She was exhausted by her own emotions. The first few days were harder than she expected. The silence that had seemed peaceful at first became oppressive. Her thoughts were too loud. She kept reaching for her phone, forgetting there was no service. She started conversations with herself, then stopped, feeling foolish. She cleaned the cabin compulsively. She reorganized the books. She chopped firewood until her hands blistered. She did anything to avoid sitting still, because sitting still meant thinking, and thinking led to feeling. On the fourth night, Dorothy lit the wood stove and sat in front of it with the journal her therapist had given her. She had been avoiding it, afraid of what she might write if she was truly honest. "Just start," she told herself. "Start anywhere." She wrote, "I am angry." Once she started, she couldn't stop. The words poured out in messy handwriting, stream of consciousness honesty she had never allowed herself. She was angry at Dean for wasting 10 years of her life. She was angry at herself for allowing it. She was angry at her father for making her believe love was control. She was angry at a world that told her to be small, be grateful, be quiet, be less. She wrote pages and pages, her hand cramping, tears falling onto the paper and smearing the ink. She wrote until she was empty, until there were no more words, until the anger had somewhere to live outside her chest. When she finished, dawn was breaking outside. She had written through the entire night. Dorothy felt hollowed out, but somehow lighter, like lancing a wound and finally letting the poison drain. She slept until afternoon, then woke feeling different, clearer. She made breakfast, or maybe it was lunch, and ate it slowly on the porch, actually tasting the food instead of just consuming it. The week passed in a rhythm that gradually became comfortable. She hiked every morning, pushing her body until she was too tired to think. She spent afternoons reading or just sitting on the porch, watching the forest. She journaled every evening, peeling back layers of herself she had buried for so long. She wrote about her mother, who had died when Dorothy was 16, how she had been gentle and kind, everything Dorothy's father wasn't, how she had tried to protect Dorothy from his controlling nature, but hadn't lived long enough to finish the job. She wrote about college, about meeting Dean, about the intoxication of first love, how pure it had felt, how right. She wrote about the slow death of her marriage, about all the small moments when she should have spoken up but didn't, about how she had made herself an accomplice in her own erasure. And she wrote about James, about how terrifying it was to feel something real again, about how she didn't trust herself to know the difference between love and need, between genuine connection and desperate grasping for safety. On the 7th day, she heard a car approaching. James appeared with bags of groceries and that familiar easy smile. "You're still here," he said. "I had odds with myself you'd last 3 days." "I wanted to leave on day 2, Dorothy admitted, helping him carry bags inside. "But something made me stay." They unpacked groceries together, and James made them lunch while Dorothy told him about the week, about the silence becoming bearable, about the journaling, about the anger she had finally let herself feel. "Anger is important," James said. "People act like it's a negative emotion, but sometimes anger is what teaches you to set boundaries. Sometimes anger is what tells you that you deserved better." "I'm tired of being angry," Dorothy said. "Then maybe you're moving through it," James suggested. "Anger is usually a phase of grief. Once you acknowledge it, once you let yourself really feel it, you can start letting it go." They sat on the porch after lunch, drinking coffee and watching birds. It felt easy, natural, like they had been doing this for years instead of months. "Can I ask you something?" Dorothy said. "Always. That night I called you, having the panic attack. How did you know exactly what to do?" James was quiet for a moment. "After Sarah died, I fell apart again. Different than the divorce, but just as complete. I had panic attacks for months. Couldn't leave my house, couldn't function. A therapist taught me that breathing technique, and it saved my life. So when you called, I just did for you what someone once did for me." "You've lost a lot," Dorothy observed. "I have," James agreed. "But I've also gained a lot. Perspective mostly. Understanding that loss is part of living, not something to be avoided at all costs. The worst thing that can happen to you is losing someone you love. The second worst thing is never loving anyone enough to risk that loss." Dorothy turned to look at him, really look at him. This man who had shown up for her consistently, who asked nothing, who offered everything freely. This man who was honest about his feelings but didn't weaponize them. This man who was unlike anyone she had ever known. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said. James's eyes widened. "Dorothy." "Wait, let me finish," she said. "I'm terrified to say it. I'm terrified because I don't trust my own judgment anymore. But I also know that I've never felt this safe with anyone. I've never felt this seen. You don't need me to be anything except who I am, and that's either love or the closest thing to it I've ever experienced." James took her hand. "Can I tell you what I think? Please." "I think you're healing," James said gently. "I think you're discovering who you are outside of being someone's anything. And I think that's beautiful and important and necessary. But I also think it would be easy to confuse gratitude with love or safety with romance. I don't want to be your next chapter before you've finished writing this one." Dorothy felt tears welling up, but she wasn't sure if they were from disappointment or relief. "So what do we do?" "We keep being honest," James said. "You stay up here for the rest of your month. You keep doing the work of figuring out who Dorothy is. And when you come back, if you still feel this way, we'll explore it. Together. As equals. No rushing, no pressure, no desperate grasping for something to fill the void. Just two whole people seeing if they fit." "And if I change my mind?" Dorothy asked. "Then we stay friends," James said simply. "I meant what I said before. Your happiness matters more to me than my own feelings. If being friends is what's right for you, I'll be the best friend you ever had." Dorothy squeezed his hand. "How are you real?" "Therapy and time," James said, making her laugh. "And one really good friend who taught me what unconditional support looks like." They talked until sunset, about everything and nothing. When James prepared to leave, he hugged her goodbye, and the hug felt different this time, more tender, more aware, more full of possibility and patience. "3 more weeks," he said. "You've got this." "What if I don't?" Dorothy asked. "Then that's okay too," James said. "There's no prize for healing fast. Take the time you need." After he left, Dorothy sat on the porch in the gathering darkness and thought about his words. 2 whole people, that's what he wanted. Not someone who needed saving, not someone using him to fill a void, but someone who was complete in herself and chose to share that completeness with him. She spent the next 3 weeks working on becoming whole. She hiked every day, pushing herself further each time. She read books she had been meaning to read for years. She cooked meals just for herself, elaborate dishes that took hours, learning to enjoy her own company. She wrote letters she would never send. To Dean, telling him all the things she had never said. To her father, explaining why she had chosen her own path. To her mother, telling her about the woman her daughter had become. And she wrote to herself, the woman in those early photographs who had believed love was enough. She forgave her for being naive. She thanked her for having the courage to choose love over money. She promised her that it wasn't all for nothing, that those years of pain had taught her what genuine love should look like. By the end of the month, Dorothy had filled 3 journals. She had hiked every trail within 10 miles of the cabin. She had spent entire days without speaking a word and learned that silence wasn't loneliness, it was peace. On the last morning, she packed her car slowly, saying goodbye to each part of the cabin that had become home. She left James a note on the table, next to the one he had left her. "James, thank you for this gift. I came here broken and scattered. I'm leaving here whole, or at least on my way to whole. I'm ready now, for whatever comes next, for whatever we become. But mostly, I'm ready to be me. See you in the city. Dorothy." She drove back down the mountain with the windows down, singing along to the radio, feeling lighter than she had in years. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she and James would become something more or stay friends. But for the first time in her adult life, she was okay with not knowing. She was okay with just being Dorothy, whoever that turned out to be. Chapter 8. The Phoenix Rises. 6 months after leaving the cabin, Dorothy stood in front of a mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair styled, but not overly so, minimal makeup. But it wasn't the outside that had changed. It was something in her eyes, something in the way she stood. She looked like someone who knew her own worth and didn't need anyone else to confirm it. Tonight was the grand opening of the first New Beginnings Center, the culmination of months of planning, building, and pouring her heart into something meaningful. The center occupied a renovated building downtown, 3 floors of classrooms, counseling rooms, childcare facilities, job training labs, and quiet spaces for women to just exist without judgment. "You ready?" James appeared in the doorway of the office where she was preparing. He wore a suit that somehow made him look both professional and approachable. 6 months of working closely together, of building this dream into reality, and he still made her heart skip a little when he smiled at her like that. "I'm terrified," Dorothy admitted. "What if nobody comes? What if we built all this and it doesn't help anyone?" "Then we'll figure out what does help and do that instead," James said. "But I don't think that's going to be a problem. Have you seen the waiting list?" He showed her the tablet. Over 300 women had signed up for various programs at the center: education courses, career counseling, therapy groups, legal aid consultations. The need was overwhelming. "We need 10 more centers," Dorothy breathed. "Then we'll build 10 more centers," James said simply. "One step at a time." The opening event was everything Dorothy had hoped for and more. Women arrived with their children, with their friends, with hope written on their faces. Rachel was there, now completing her master's degree and volunteering as a mentor. She gave Dorothy a hug that lasted a long time. "You gave me my life back," Rachel whispered. "Now I get to help give other women theirs. That's a legacy, Dorothy. That's real." The mayor spoke. Local business leaders pledged support. But the moment that made Dorothy cry was when one of the women from that first support group stood up and shared her story. "A year ago, I was sleeping in my car with my kids," the woman said. "I'd escaped an abusive marriage with nothing. I didn't know where to turn or how I would survive. Then I met Dorothy at a support group. She didn't just hand me money. She didn't just solve my problems. She believed in me when I had forgotten how to believe in myself. Today, I have a job. I have an apartment. My kids are in school. And I'm studying to become a counselor so I can help women like me. That's what this center does. It doesn't save you. It gives you the tools to save yourself." The room erupted in applause. Dorothy couldn't stop crying. James handed her a tissue and whispered, "This is what it's all about. Remember this moment." After the formal presentations, Dorothy walked through the center with James, watching women explore the different rooms, sign up for programs, talk to counselors. The childcare center was full of kids playing while their mothers attended orientation sessions. The computer lab buzzed with women learning new skills. The quiet room had women sitting in meditation or just breathing, giving themselves permission to rest. "We did this," Dorothy said, taking James's hand. Over the past 6 months, they had moved slowly, carefully, from friends into something more. No grand declarations, no dramatic moments, just a gradual deepening of connection that felt as natural as breathing. "You did this," James corrected. "I just helped with the logistics." "We're a team," Dorothy insisted. "Equal partners." James squeezed her hand. "Equal partners," he agreed. As the event wound down, Dorothy found a quiet corner to catch her breath. She pulled out her phone and saw a message from an unknown number. Her heart sank, then steadied. She wasn't that woman anymore. She wasn't afraid of messages from her past. It was from Dean. "I saw the news coverage of your center opening. It's incredible, Dorothy. You're changing the world. I want you to know I'm engaged now. To a woman named Maria. She knows everything about my past, about what I did to you. She challenges me every day to be better. I'm working as a manager at the factory, and I'm happy. Really happy in a way I never was when I was chasing money and status. I hope you're happy too. You deserve every good thing. Dean." Dorothy read the message twice. She felt nothing sharp, nothing painful, just a quiet acknowledgement that they had both moved forward, Both found their way to better versions of themselves. She typed back, "I'm glad you found happiness, Dean. Truly, take care of yourself." Then she put her phone away and went to find James. He was talking to a group of donors, charming them in that easy way he had. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself and came to meet her. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's perfect," Dorothy said. "Dean texted. He's engaged, he's happy." James searched her face. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved," Dorothy said honestly. "He deserves to be happy, we all do." "Dance with me," James said suddenly. "There's no music," Dorothy laughed. "So we'll make our own," James said, pulling her close. They swayed together in the empty hallway, just the two of them, the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of conversation from the main room. "I love you," James said quietly. "I know we said we'd take it slow, but I need you to know. I love who you are. I love who you're becoming. I love building this with you. I just love you." Dorothy looked up at him, this man who had waited patiently while she found herself, who had supported without smothering, who had loved without possessing. "I love you too," she said. "For real this time. Not need, not gratitude, not fear of being alone. Just love." James kissed her, and it felt like coming home to a home they had built together, piece by piece, day by day. The weeks following the center opening were chaos. Media coverage brought more donors, more women seeking help, more opportunities to expand. Dorothy and James worked 18-hour days, building systems, hiring staff, opening satellite locations. They moved in together not because they had to, but because they wanted to. James's apartment became their apartment, and they decorated it together, choosing things they both loved instead of compromising or one person deciding for both. One evening, after a particularly long day at the center, they collapsed on their couch with takeout containers and exhausted smiles. "I have a question," James said between bites of noodles. "Shoot," Dorothy said. "What would you think about opening a center in that mountain town near the cabin? It's underserved, and there's a building for sale that would be perfect." Dorothy considered. "That would be center number 5. Are we ready to expand that fast?" "We're ready," James said. "But more importantly, you're ready. You're not that woman who was afraid of her own shadow anymore. You're the woman who changes lives. So yes, I think we're ready." Dorothy smiled. "Then let's do it. But I have a condition." "What's that?" "We keep the cabin," Dorothy said. "We go there once a month, just us, to remember why we're doing this, to stay grounded, to breathe." "Deal," James said. "Although I have a counter-proposal." "Oh?" James set down his takeout container and pulled a small box from his pocket. Dorothy's breath caught. "Before you panic," James said quickly, "this isn't what you think it is. Or maybe it is, but with a Dorothy and James twist. Open it." Dorothy opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were 2 matching silver rings, simple and elegant. "These are promise rings," James explained. "Not engagement rings, just a promise. A promise that we're building this life together as equals. That we'll keep choosing each other every day for as long as it feels right. No pressure, no timelines, no societal expectations. Just us, building something real." Dorothy slipped one ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day you came back from the cabin and I saw who you had become," James admitted. "I knew then that I wanted to build a life with you, but I also knew that you needed time to be sure, so I've been carrying these around, waiting for the right moment." "This is the right moment," Dorothy said, putting the matching ring on his finger. "James Rothwell, I promise to keep choosing you. I promise to be your equal partner. I promise to build this beautiful, messy life with you, one day at a time." They kissed, and it felt like sealing something sacred. Not a traditional engagement, not a rush toward marriage, just 2 people acknowledging that they were building something worth protecting. That night, lying in bed with James's arm around her, Dorothy thought about how far she had come. From the woman in the black coat, hiding who she was, to the woman wearing a simple silver ring, proud of everything she had become. Her phone buzzed one last time, a message from Rachel. "Dorothy, thank you isn't enough for what you've done for me and for hundreds of other women. But I want you to know something. You didn't just build a center, you built a movement, you built hope, and that's everything." Dorothy smiled in the darkness and whispered to James, "We built hope." "No," James whispered back, "you built hope. I just had the privilege of watching you do it." Dorothy fell asleep feeling something she had never truly felt before, complete. Not because of James, though he was part of it. Not because of the centers, though they were part of it too, but because for the first time in her life, she was exactly who she wanted to be. No masks, no hiding, no making herself smaller. Just Dorothy, building a life worth living, with someone who valued every part of her journey. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier in a cream envelope with gold lettering. "You're invited to the Grand Belmore Hotel Annual Charity Gala, an evening to celebrate community leadership and philanthropic excellence." Dorothy held the invitation, her hands steady in a way they wouldn't have been a year ago. The Grand Belmore, the same ballroom where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. The same marble floors where she had walked out wearing that necklace and never looked back. "Are you going to go?" James asked, reading over her shoulder while making breakfast. "I don't know," Dorothy admitted. "Part of me wants to. But another part of me thinks it's stirring up old pain for no reason." "What if it's not about old pain?" James suggested. "What if it's about showing yourself how far you've come? Not proving anything to anyone else, just acknowledging your own growth." Dorothy turned the invitation over in her hands. "The foundation is being honored as Community Organization of the Year. That's why we're invited." "Then you should definitely go," James said. "Accept the recognition. Let those people see what you built from the ashes of that night. Not for revenge, just for truth." Dorothy made the decision that afternoon. She would go. She would accept the award on behalf of all the women her foundation had helped. She would walk into that ballroom with her head high, not as Dean Brando's humiliated wife, but as Dorothy Taylor Ashford, founder of New Beginnings, partner to a man who valued her and someone who had transformed pain into purpose. The night of the gala, Dorothy chose her outfit carefully. Not the celestial star necklace this time, not the coat and hidden diamonds, just a simple emerald green dress that made her feel beautiful without trying to prove anything. She wore the silver promise ring James had given her and a smile that came from genuine happiness rather than defensive pride. James picked her up in a simple suit, nothing flashy. They drove to the Grand Belmore together, and when they pulled up to the entrance where those 10 Rolls-Royces had once waited, Dorothy felt a moment of vertigo. The memories came flooding back, Dean's cruel words, Amber's laughter, her own trembling hands on that coat zipper. "You okay?" James squeezed her hand. "I'm okay," Dorothy said, and she meant it. That was a different woman. She needed armor. I don't. They walked into the ballroom together, and Dorothy felt every eye turned toward them. But this time the attention didn't feel like judgment. It felt like acknowledgement. People approached them all evening. Donors who had contributed to the foundation, business leaders who wanted to partner with them, women who had gone through the programs and wanted to say thank you. "Dorothy Taylor Ashford," a voice said behind her. Dorothy turned to find Amber, Dean's former mistress, looking significantly less confident than she had a year ago. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Amber," Dorothy said calmly. "How have you been?" Amber shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to apologize for that night, for my part in humiliating you. I was young and stupid and chasing something that wasn't real. I'm sorry." Dorothy studied her for a moment. Amber looked different too, less polished, less predatory, more human. "Thank you for saying that. I hope you found what you were looking for." "I didn't," Amber admitted, "but I learned what not to look for, which is maybe just as important. What you're doing with your foundation, it's amazing. I've been volunteering at one of your centers, just administrative work, but it feels good to do something that actually matters. Dorothy smiled. Then maybe we both found our way to better versions of ourselves. After Amber left, James wrapped his arm around Dorothy's waist. That was generous of you. Forgiveness isn't generosity, Dorothy said. It's freedom. I don't need to carry anger toward people who don't matter to me anymore. The Master of Ceremonies called everyone to attention. It's time to present our Community Organization of the Year award. This year's recipient has transformed countless lives through innovative programs supporting women and families in transition. Please welcome Dorothy Taylor Ashford, founder of New Beginnings. Dorothy walked to the stage, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She looked out at the crowd, at the same faces that had watched her humiliation, and she felt nothing but peace. Thank you for this recognition, she began. But this award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Rachel, who went back to school and is now mentoring other women. It belongs to Sarah, who escaped an abusive situation and is raising her children in safety. It belongs to Maria, who believed she was too old to start over and is now running her own bakery. It belongs to every woman who looked at her reflection and decided she deserved better, then did the hard work of becoming better. She paused, scanning the crowd, and her eyes caught on a familiar face near the back. Dean stood there, with a woman beside him who must be his fiancée Maria. He looked different, humbler. He was watching Dorothy with something like pride in his eyes, and when their gazes met, he nodded once, a gesture of respect. Dorothy nodded back, acknowledging him, acknowledging their shared past, acknowledging that they had both survived and grown. Then she continued her speech. A year ago, I stood in this room wearing an expensive necklace, trying to prove I was worth something. Tonight, I stand here wearing a simple dress and a silver ring that cost less than dinner, and I know my worth. Not because of what I own, but because of what I've built. Not buildings and programs, though those matter, but connection, community, hope. That's what New Beginnings is about. Not saving anyone, but giving women the tools to save themselves. Thank you for recognizing that work, and thank you to every woman who had the courage to walk through our doors and say, I deserve better. You are the real heroes of this story. The applause was thunderous. Dorothy walked off the stage and straight into James's arms. He held her tight, whispering, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of me too, Dorothy whispered back. After the official presentations, people mingled. Dorothy found herself face to face with Dean and Maria. Up close, Maria was beautiful in an understated way, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Dorothy, this is my fiancée, Maria, Dean said. His voice was different, softer, more genuine. Maria, this is Dorothy. I've heard a lot about you, Maria said warmly. Dean's been very honest about his past. I appreciate that, and I want to thank you. Thank me? Dorothy was surprised. For not letting him destroy you, Maria said. For building something beautiful instead of something bitter. You could have spent your life trying to hurt him back, but you didn't. You built something that helps people. That takes real strength. Dorothy liked Maria immediately. He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, Maria said, taking Dean's hand. We're both doing the work to be better people. That's all anyone can do. Dean spoke then, his voice humble. Dorothy, I want you to know something. I'm in therapy. I'm working on understanding why I became that person, why I needed to make you small to feel big. I'm becoming someone my kids will be proud of someday. Not the man who built an empire, but the man who learned what actually matters. I'm glad, Dorothy said. And she meant it. We all deserve second chances, especially the ones we give ourselves. They talked for a few more minutes. Easy conversation between people who had been through hell and come out the other side separately, but similarly transformed. When they parted, Dorothy felt a final door closing. Not with sadness, but with closure. James was waiting for her at their table, and when she sat down, he pulled her close. How do you feel? Complete, Dorothy said. This was exactly what I needed. To come back here not as a victim, not as someone seeking revenge, but as someone who moved forward and built something meaningful. To face Dean and Amber and everyone who witnessed that night and show them that I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm happy. You are happy, James observed. It shows. You practically glow these days. That's love, Dorothy said, kissing him softly. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask me to be smaller or different or anything other than exactly who I am. As the gala wound down, James stood and offered his hand. Dance with me? This time with actual music? They moved to the dance floor and Dorothy rested her head on James's shoulder, swaying to the music. Around them, other couples danced, the same society people who had ignored her or pitied her or judged her. But Dorothy didn't care about them anymore. She cared about the man holding her, about the women in her programs finding their strength, about the life she was building one intentional choice at a time. I have something for you, James said as they danced, but I want to wait until we're somewhere more private. Should I be nervous? Dorothy asked. Only if the idea of forever makes you nervous, James said, smiling mysteriously. They left the gala together, hand in hand, walking past the spot where Dorothy had removed her coat and changed her life. This time, she didn't need to remove anything or prove anything. She was already exactly who she needed to be. In the car, James pulled out an envelope. This isn't a proposal. Well, it's a proposal, but not that kind. Dorothy opened it to find architectural plans. What is this? Remember when we talked about opening a center near the cabin? James said. I found the perfect building. It's an old schoolhouse, beautiful bones right in the heart of town. I wanted to know if you'd like to design this one together. Make it exactly what those women need. Equal partners, equal vision. Dorothy looked at the plans, at the possibilities, at the future they were building together. Yes, absolutely, yes. There's one more thing, James said, pulling out a second envelope. This is an invitation to Christmas dinner at my daughter's house. She wants to meet the woman who has her dad smiling again. No pressure, but I'd love for you to be there. Dorothy felt tears welling up, but they were happy tears. James was inviting her into his family, into his life, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone he wanted beside him. I'd love to meet your daughter. They drove home through the city lights, talking about the center plans, about Christmas dinner, about the 1,000 small futures they were building together. When they arrived home, Dorothy stood in their apartment and looked around at their life. Books on the shelves they had chosen together, photographs from the cabin and from center openings, a life built on partnership and respect and genuine love. Thank you, she said to James. For what? For waiting for me to be ready, for not trying to save me, for loving me as an equal instead of a project. James pulled her close. Thank you for letting me love you, for building this beautiful life with me, for being exactly who you are. They stood there in their home, two whole people who had chosen each other, and Dorothy felt something she had never felt before, certainty. Not about the future, because the future was always uncertain, but certainty about herself, about her worth, about her ability to choose wisely and love healthily and build beautifully. This was what happiness felt like, not fireworks or grand gestures or expensive jewelry. Just two people building a life together, one intentional choice at a time, surrounded by work that mattered and love that was real. Chapter 10. The Empire of Love. 5 years had passed since the night Dorothy removed her coat at the Grand Belmore Hotel, and the woman she had been that night felt like a distant memory. Dorothy stood at the window of the 20th New Beginning Center, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. This center, built in the town near James's cabin, was different from all the others. It wasn't just a program building, it was a community, a small village of tiny houses where women could live while rebuilding their lives, surrounded by support and nature, and the space to heal. "You're up early," James said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. His silver hair caught the morning light, and the lines around his eyes had deepened from years of smiling. Big day ahead. The biggest, Dorothy agreed, turning to kiss him. They had married 2 years ago in a ceremony at the cabin, with just family and the women from the first support group. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just a celebration of love between equals. Dorothy had worn a simple white dress and flowers in her hair. James had cried when he saw her. She had cried when he said his vows. It had been perfect. Today was the grand opening of the New Beginnings Institute, a training facility where women who had gone through the programs could become counselors, teachers, and mentors for others. Rachel was the director, and she had built a curriculum based on lived experience rather than theory. Women helping women, creating a cycle of healing and empowerment that could sustain itself. Mrs. Rothwell, James said, using the name Dorothy had chosen to take. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. This time, marriage wasn't about losing herself. It was about choosing a partner and building something together. Are you ready to change the world again? I'm ready to watch other women change their worlds, Dorothy corrected. That's what this is really about. They drove to the institute together, hands linked on the console between them, comfortable in the silence they had learned to treasure. Their life together was nothing like Dorothy's marriage to Dean had been. There were no power games, no making themselves small or large to accommodate the other. They simply existed together, supporting each other's dreams, challenging each other's assumptions, loving each other's imperfections. The institute was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Women from all 20 centers had traveled to be here for the opening. Some brought their children, now school-aged and thriving. Some brought partners they had found after learning to love themselves first. Some came alone, proud of their independence and in no rush to share it. Rachel met them at the entrance, her master's degree now complete, her confidence transformed from that tired woman Dorothy had met years ago. Dorothy, James, thank you for being here. This wouldn't exist without you. It wouldn't exist without you, Dorothy corrected. You're the one who turned a vision into reality. We all did it together, Rachel said. That's the point, isn't it? We're stronger together than we ever could be alone. The opening ceremony was simple but moving. Women shared their stories of transformation. A former corporate executive who had been financially abused and now taught financial literacy. A young mother who had escaped with nothing and now ran the childcare program. A grandmother who had left a 40-year marriage and now mentored women twice her age through their own transitions. When it was Dorothy's turn to speak, she looked out at the faces of hundreds of women who had walked through the doors of New Beginnings centers and walked out stronger, wiser, more themselves. She thought about the woman she had been, hiding under a coat, trying to prove her worth through diamonds. She thought about the journey from that night to this moment. 5 years ago, I thought revenge meant showing people what they had missed, Dorothy began. I thought it meant proving I was successful, powerful, worthy. But I was wrong. Real revenge isn't about showing anyone anything. It's about building a life so beautiful that you forget to be angry. It's about transforming pain into purpose, hurt into healing, loss into love. She gestured to the women in the room. Every single one of you is my revenge. Every time one of you walks out of an abusive situation and builds something better, that's revenge. Every time one of you teaches your daughter that she doesn't have to make herself small for anyone, that's revenge. Every time one of you looks in the mirror and sees your own worth, that's the greatest revenge of all. Because you didn't just survive, you thrived, and that changes everything. The applause was thunderous. Women were crying, laughing, hugging each other. Dorothy stepped down from the podium and was immediately surrounded by women who wanted to share their stories, their gratitude, their hope. Later, during a quiet moment, Dorothy found herself alone in the Institute's library. She had designed this room herself, making it feel like the cabin where she had learned to heal. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, comfortable chairs arranged in circles rather than rows, books about resilience, healing, growth, and the messy, beautiful work of becoming whole. A knock on the door made her turn. A young woman stood there, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and clasped hands. "Mrs. Rothwell, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to thank you." "Please call me Dorothy," she said, gesturing to a chair. "What's your name?" "Jasmine," the woman said, sitting down. "I've been in the program for 6 months. I left my husband because he did what your first husband did. Made me feel worthless. Made me believe I was lucky he put up with me. I saw a video of you from that night at the gala. I've watched it probably 100 times. Dorothy's chest tightened. That video still circulated online, the moment that had changed her life captured forever on dozens of phones. She had stopped watching it years ago. "What did you see when you watched it?" Dorothy asked gently. "I saw a woman who decided she was done being small," Jasmine said. "I saw a woman who chose herself, and I thought, if she can do that, maybe I can too. So I left. I came here, and now I'm enrolling in the Institute program. I want to become a counselor. I want to help other women see what you helped me see." Dorothy felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "What did I help you see?" "That I was never the problem," Jasmine whispered. "That I deserved better. That choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. You gave me permission to save my own life." They talked for an hour about Jasmine's journey, her plans, her dreams. When the young woman left, Dorothy sat in the library for a long time, thinking about how one moment of courage could ripple out in ways she never imagined. That night at the gala, she had just been trying to survive. She hadn't known she was starting a revolution. James found her there as the sun was setting, painting the forest in amber light. "There you are. People are asking for you." "James, can I tell you something?" Dorothy asked. "Always," he said, sitting beside her. "I'm happy," Dorothy said. "Not just content, not just okay. Genuinely, deeply happy. I wake up excited about the day. I go to bed grateful for the life we've built. I love you in a way I didn't know love could feel. And I keep waiting for it to fall apart, for something to go wrong, because I spent so long believing I didn't deserve this." James took her hand, the one wearing both her wedding ring and the promise ring he had given her years ago. She had never taken the promise ring off, even after they married. It reminded her of the moment she had chosen to become whole before choosing to be his. "You deserve every bit of this," James said. "You built this life with intention and courage and hard work. It's not going to fall apart. And even if challenges come, because they will, we'll face them together. That's what partnerships are about." "How did I get so lucky?" Dorothy asked. "It wasn't luck," James said. "You chose to heal. You chose to grow. You chose to build something meaningful instead of staying bitter. That wasn't luck. That was you being brave enough to become the person you were always meant to be." They sat together in the fading light, two people who had found each other at the right time, when they were both ready to love as equals, rather than as needs or wounds, searching for healing. Outside, they could hear laughter from the reception, women celebrating their journeys, their futures, their freedom. "I got something today," James said, pulling out his phone. "An email from Dean." Dorothy's eyebrows rose. She and Dean rarely communicated, just the occasional update on their respective lives. "What did he say?" James showed her the email. It was brief. "James, take care of her. She deserves everything good in this world. I've watched what you two have built together, and it's beautiful. My wife Maria and I are expecting twins. I'm going to teach my daughters that women are complete human beings, not accessories. That's the best apology I can make for who I was. Thank you for being the man I should have been." Dean. Dorothy read it twice. "He's really changed." "People can," James said, "when they choose to do the work just like you did." "Just like we both did," Dorothy corrected. As evening fell completely, they returned to the reception. Dorothy's stepdaughter Emma was there with her family, her children calling Dorothy Grandma Dorothy despite no blood relation. Family, Dorothy had learned, wasn't about DNA. It was about showing up, being present, choosing each other again and again. The evening ended with a surprise. Rachel took the microphone and called for attention. "Before everyone leaves, we have one more thing. Dorothy, James, can you come up here?" Confused, they made their way to the small stage. Rachel was crying happy tears, and the entire room was smiling like they were in on a secret. "5 years ago, you helped me when I had nothing," Rachel said. "You gave me education, support, and most importantly, you believed in me. Today we're announcing the Dorothy Taylor Ashford Scholarship Fund. Every woman who graduates from the Institute will receive full funding for continued education in their chosen field. No loans, no debt, just opportunity. It's funded by donations from the thousands of women you've helped over the years. We all wanted to give back what you gave us." Dorothy couldn't speak. She looked at James, who was crying openly now, then back at the room full of women who had transformed their pain into this beautiful gift. "This is," Dorothy tried to find words, "this is everything." "This is what you built," Rachel said. "Not buildings or programs. You built a community of women who refuse to stay broken, who choose each other, who transform pain into power. This is your legacy." Later that night, Dorothy and James drove back to the cabin. They had kept it all these years, visiting once a month just as they had promised themselves. It was their place to remember, to reconnect, to breathe. They sat on the porch in the darkness, listening to the forest breathe around them. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of peace, of possibility, of contentment earned through hard work and intentional choices. "Do you ever think about that night?" James asked. "The gala where it all changed?" "Sometimes," Dorothy admitted, "but not the way I used to. I used to think of it as the night I escaped. Now I think of it as the night I started becoming myself." "Any regrets?" James asked. Dorothy thought about it, about the 10 years with Dean, the pain, the humiliation, the slow death of her first marriage, about the panic attacks and the therapy and the hard work of healing, about every difficult moment that had led her here. "No," she said finally. "I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but I wouldn't change my journey. Every hard moment taught me something I needed to know. Every breakdown led to a breakthrough. Every ending made room for a beginning. I am who I am because of all of it, and I like who I am." "I love who you are," James said, pulling her close. "And I'm grateful every day that you chose me to build this life with." "You chose me too," Dorothy reminded him. "That's what makes it work." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then James said, "What do you want to build next?" Dorothy smiled. That was the question, wasn't it? Not what had she built, but what would she build next? Because life wasn't about arriving at a destination, it was about the constant creation of meaning, purpose, love. "I want to build more centers," Dorothy said. 20 more, 50 more, however many it takes. "I want to build a movement that outlives us, that keeps helping women long after we're gone. I want to build a family with you, not just us, but Emma and her kids and everyone we choose to love. I want to build memories, James. Just memories of days like today, of work that matters, and love that's real and a life that was worth living." "Then that's what we'll build," James said simply. "Together." As they sat there under the stars, Dorothy thought about the woman she had been, standing in that ballroom in her coat, diamonds hidden beneath, worth hidden beneath, self hidden beneath. That woman had been so afraid, so small, so convinced that her value came from external validation. Now, sitting here with James, having built an empire of hope instead of an empire of revenge, Dorothy understood something fundamental. The diamond had never been in the necklace. The diamond had always been her. She had just needed to remove all the layers of other people's opinions, other people's cruelty, other people's limitations to see it. She wasn't the woman in the coat anymore. She was the woman who had removed the coat and found herself underneath. She was the woman who had chosen healing over bitterness, building over destroying, love over revenge. She was Dorothy Taylor Ashford Rothwell, founder of New Beginnings, wife to an equal partner, friend to hundreds of women she had helped, and most importantly, friend to herself. And that was the greatest revenge of all, not showing anyone else what they had missed, but becoming someone she was proud to be, building a life she was grateful to live, and loving herself enough to know she deserved every beautiful moment of it. The stars shone overhead, infinite and eternal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new moments to choose courage over comfort. But tonight, Dorothy simply existed in this perfect moment, with the man she loved and the life they had built, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had removed her coat 5 years ago and revealed diamonds. But the real treasure had never been the necklace. It had been her courage to stand in her truth, her strength to build something meaningful, and her wisdom to know that the best revenge was simply living well, and she was living very well indeed. The end.